the exhibit here starts here, and this is really focusing on Ujima Village, because that project, you know, was fought for, it got recognized, you know, the County of Los Angeles started doing what was called monitoring and testing, and then, you know, what's, I guess you call it remediation, extraction of the toxins. And just like what's happening at Jordan Downs and what's happening in the railroad right-of-ways, no one's talking about the residents. We talk about the site. And it reminds me that the Housing Authority for the City of Los Angeles has a slogan about Watts saying, Watts is worth it. And everywhere you turn, whenever you look at the Housing Authority's role as a developer in Watts, everything they talk about is about development. But when you talk about people, it's almost like, you know, and that's how I take it. I might be wrong, Thelmy, but that's how I take it, is that, you know, oh, there's Thelmy and her crew, you know, let's bring the meeting to an end. But they can't bring the meeting to an end. The cat's out the bag, the data and the results are there. And so we can look at the future of Jordan Downs through the past of Ujima Village. That's the message here. So all the way back in 1956, a picture was taken of what was called a tank farm, just over here off of Central and El Segundo. And these circles you see here are all oil tanks. And this was called a absorption plant, whatever the hell that means, an absorption plant. And these things right here were called, I don't know why I always forget that, because it's really, really important to remember.
I think they're reservoirs.
They're called reservoirs, but one is a reservoir number 7, one is a reservoir number 6. This is reservoir number 6, reservoir number 7. As we go through this exhibit, I'll show you charts where the center of the greatest toxicity deep into the ground is right here. So this is 1956, which, you know, it was still here in 1956, so I'm not sure when Ujima Village was actually built. Can you tell me that?
70s.
70. So when you look at this chart, and come around so you can see, you see that these are the symbols of where those tanks were in that. And the big, you know, reservoirs and the absorption plant and so on. They built Ujima Village and Magic Johnson Park on top of this toxic field. And all these little red triangles are where they installed vapor probes, where they were monitoring how toxic soil was by you know, testing it through these vapor probes. And the probes went, you know, 5 feet, 10 feet, 15 feet into the ground. But that was in 2008. In 2011, they proposed a whole nother series of probes, which are all of the blue diamonds, turquoise diamonds, and then these red ones with the dot in the middle and the yellow triangle with the black triangle inside were all proposed in 2011, March of 2011. The reason that I believe they were proposed is because those probes that they put in 2008 were showing them significant levels of toxicity. So they put the probes in, and then they put in groundwater monitoring wells. And first they put in some shallow wells, then they put in some deeper wells, and then they added wells out beyond the borderline of the old tank farm, out into the community to test what the conditions were out into the residential area. When you look at this one, this is what the monitors showed them in 2010. Now remember, they put the monitors in 2008. 2010, they could see that they had toxicity, you know, at these varying levels. This is benzene at 5 feet deep, and you can see the size of it. This, you know, this was a housing complex, and so the whole complex was sitting on top of these two very toxic plumes of benzene. And in some cases with 10,000 parts per cubic meter and up, where the colors are darkest. Same period of time testing for methane. So now you've got benzene, methane, the housing development sitting right on top of this. And so, we can kind of, we can kind of believe that maybe the housing authority, when they built this thing, didn't know how toxic it was. Maybe there was no EPA yet. Maybe the rules, the regulations, the conditions precluded them from really producing what are called phase 1, phase 2 reports that would have told them today how toxic this was. But still, Dr. Smith, talking a little bit about his journey with this project and when it started. So when he started and when his group started is when the county became aware that there was a citizen's concern for the toxicity of this site. So come down and gather around. And as you're passing some of the comments and so on the right side, we'll come back around because that's where you see what's now, you see the photos, you see statements being made. But I want to complete this and then we'll circle again for what you're missing. So here we are, the same kind of charts, but now we're testing at 10 feet for benzene and for methane. And you can see how the shape of the plumes change. The shape of the plume changes radically here. It's huge, and you see the beginning of another plume here, but this may be part of one of the most sinister aspects of this particular project because the property line is where this plume seems to be starting, but they just cut it off as if it went to the border and said, oops, I can't go past there because that's outside of the project, right? But you've got 100,000 parts per million and up in this whole area, and we're just at 15 feet here. When you get here, this is at 32 feet. And now you're seeing that whole plume at 32 feet. The deeper you go, the bigger it gets, the more toxic it gets, and the more apparent it is that they just didn't test beyond this property line because on the other side of it is a residential area. And government doesn't have any responsibility for the residential cleanup of this toxicity, but they have to clean up the public sites. They have to, deal with the park, the housing development, which was from the county housing authority, and if it spreads to other public property, they have to deal with that. Here, you've got 1 million parts and up of benzene per cubic meter. Right here at the center of that absorption tank or absorption pool or whatever you want to call it, that was in the middle of that housing development. That little school that
Honey's Little Angels.
I'm sorry?
Honey's Little Angels.
Yes, Honey's Little Angels, the little child care center right across the street from this site that you all took pictures of, is right here. Right here. They tore down the housing development, relocated all the people, tore it down, but allowed the little child care center to keep operating because it wasn't their responsibility. They claim. But again, here you go. You can imagine what this plume looks like if it comes out here and what those residents that live here are exposed to. We come right here around the corner. And I'd just like to read this statement. Come on around, everybody, so you can all see right here. There's plenty of room over here. This is a statement. I asked Felmy Perez if she would help me with something, that kind of talks about this whole thing. And she wrote this, and I didn't change a word of it, and so because I didn't change a word of it, I made sure her name is under it. But I just want to read the statement to you before we talk about this last panel here. With over 41,000 residents in a 2.12 square mile neighborhood, the community of Watts is one of the densest in the city of Los Angeles. It is also one of the youngest. The largest proportion, 28% of Watts residents, are children aged 10 years and under, and approximately half of all residents are minors aged 17 or younger. Not unlike the rest of Los Angeles, Watts suffers from its share of crime, and with an average household income of $25,161, it is also one of the poorest communities in the city. Nevertheless, Watts is a vibrant, multicultural, family-oriented, and historically significant community. In terms of health indicators, Watts residents bear the cruel distinction of having the lowest life expectancy of any other community in the state, nearly 12 years lower than the residents of nearby Brentwood. The California Environmental Protection Agency gives us some indication as to why that is. Using its recently released EnviroScan 2.0 mapping tool, Cal EPA ranks several Watts-located census tracts in the top 5% of the most pollution-burdened and vulnerable communities in the state. These neighborhoods also rank in the 95th cleanup percentile, meaning that the number and type of cleanup sites is higher than in 95% of all California census tracts. This same tool also demonstrates that Watts neighborhoods are plagued with unhealthy air, with its neighborhoods ranking in California's worst 15% of modeled air concentration of toxic chemical releases. The vulnerability of the community cannot be overstated, and access to health care and information regarding environmental toxins has been highly limited. However, the evidence of the toxicity of the Jordan Downs neighborhood in the northeast corner of Watts and of the city-owned right-of-way scattered throughout the greater Watts community provide an impetus for concerned residents, elected officials, and civic leaders to come together to identify hazardous toxic sites and ensure environmental justice happens with the objective to improve community health. The many children of Watts are the future of Los Angeles, and Los Angeles has a responsibility to protect the health of its future. And so again, Thelmy Perez. So again, you know, through what happened at Ujima Village, we're able to almost predict what the outcomes will be from Jordan Downs if something radical doesn't happen quickly. This final chart on the spread of methane gas at 32 feet. Again, you see the size of this thing. If you just continue the way it seems to be shaped, it comes all out into this community. And at 32 feet, you know, we're not at the water table, we're nearing. The water table's at about 60, right?
Mhm.
So at 32 feet, you're approaching the limit of depth that this thing can go. The limit, as I understand it, is 40 feet. If it's deeper than 40 feet, then it would be getting into the water. So they tested, as I understand, to 35 feet. I don't see any evidence that they went deeper. Maybe they did, but all of these, you know, monitoring devices and the wells and so on went from 5 feet deep to 35 feet deep, and then they report out up to 32 feet. They started testing it in 2008, and in 2011 they brought in another layer of testing. In 2014, they started extracting it. And in 2015, after less than a year, they'd already taken out more than 175,000 pounds of toxic chemical waste. 175,000 pounds in around 9 months. And so for me, you know, in the work I want to do with Dr. Smith is to really uncover what happened in between the time when they pierced the earth hundreds of times with these monitors. They went 32 feet deep in, but they didn't start doing anything with that, cleaning it up, for 7 or 8 years. What was happening with those vapors? Were they allowing it to dissipate? You know, if we got 175,000 pounds out in 9 months, how much escaped that didn't get filtered, that didn't get taken care of? And so that's the kind of work that I'm hoping we can get to the bottom of. Because again, the more we learn and care and share about Ujima Village, the more we know, what's at risk at Jordan Downs and in the right-of-ways and so on. There's just a couple more panels that I want to show you. In fact, really what I want to do is show you one panel, and then I'd like for Thelmy and Monica and Ernie to share some of their experiences.
Tim, in reference to what you were just saying, isn't this that